Americans might be there might be ethnic cleansing as it was before against the Native Americans, but the same goes for the Spanish-speaking American people who might face the same fate, and others who are not completely under control of the ruling system, regardless of race. And you see the situation as I see it, because I have some very deep experience of an extremely racist country in the past. This was South Africa under apartheid, the apartheid system, because I had the honor to fight with the African National Congress and especially the armed wing Umkhonto we Sizwe in South Africa. So I have seen different scenarios during many years, and even some situations where it looked like that there was no hope, but always there's hope whenever there are only one or two or three people who are getting up, fighting the system, organizing themselves, linking up networks as international as possible, being together with brothers and sisters fighting and resisting, and step by step things change. So I have no gray hair. Unfortunately, the camera doesn't work, so nobody can see my gray hair. But despite of the fact that I have gray hair, I still have very much hope on things to change. What is
We're
very
going to have a
important
picture
is
of you
that,
later, Michael.
inshallah, inshallah. And I think the question, we have a lot of problems. We have in some places like America and the United States, but also in Europe, the consciousness of the people is very low, no doubt. But the ray of hope that there's growing resistance, and that we have to do our job to tell our people wherever we are that the resistance is possible. And the important thing is that we have to find ways to break the silence about resistance. The important thing is to not only to break the silence, but to get people to know each other, because resistance is international. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's also important, as Imam Ali said, the devil inside yourself. And what is the devil inside yourself? You have the big devil and the small devil. But the devil inside yourself has to be every day, every minute, to be strong enough to fight against laziness, against the tendency of forgetting that your brother and sister somewhere else is under harsh pressure. So I think I'm optimistic. Inshallah, things are going to change.
Okay, I just have a question about this. I just have a question about the whole issue that we all talked about, and I'm just thinking that maybe it can be mixed. Actually, I mean, both imperialism is making some situation for the poor, for the blacks, for the Muslims, for any kind of minority or any kind of race, to do something, to do something in a brutal way. For example, in the government lowers the chance of, for example, education, or keeps the blacks in in a low kind of economy or financial situation. It doesn't, for example, as I saw in some statistics, actually we just have 78%, for example, of BA graduates as being white, and the rest are actually the blacks or other races. So it seems that the system is actually putting some kind of limitation for blacks to be always at a low level, and this will end up in different acts from blacks, and this will end up in brutality, in lack of knowledge, in lack of education, in violence, and as we can see, there are lots of, for example, black prisoners in the, prisons of United States. We have lots of, crimes
That's the main
committed
reason of
by blacks.
illiteracy.
Yeah, exactly. So is it, at the result, we can see lots of violence from black people that actually justifies some part of the brutality of the police. Or at the same level, we have the issue about Muslims. For example, the government lowers the chance of everything for Muslims, and also it builds some kind of Islamophobia, or some extremist groups, and they will try to do as some extremists, and they will try to show violence as Muslims, and then everybody would say that, yes, see, everybody, all of these Muslims are, it is actually justified that we, react in front of them in a violent way. So I think it's a mixture of, imperialism and also the lack of knowledge of both groups, government, blacks, governments, or Muslims. What is your idea about this point? Is it right or not? I mean, I'm asking from all of you. Maybe, Teresa, Michael, Tim, you can give me your ideas about this.
I can say something about that if you like.
Sure, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you have a point there, and of course the question of education is not just about technical education, because we in Western countries tend to think of education as technical and not necessarily linked to values, so the values, the ethics of education are important. I mean, my country in Australia and the US mirrors to some extent the extreme individualism in the US. Now that extreme individualism really precludes the possibility of joining cause with other people. Traditionally imperialism has divided the subject people. So Fatima mentioned earlier Native Americans. To my mind, there's a very distinct discrimination going on with Indigenous North Americans as with Indigenous Australians, and that is the historical dispossession of land and their culture. So playing the Native Americans against the African Americans has a long tradition in the US. Even back in the slavery era, they were used against Native Americans in the US. So that division of people is an important historical legacy, and the educational point you're mentioning, I think, is a very important one. It's about developing that political consciousness that Teresa has pointed out is missing. So I think you're quite right, Ali, that this common system that in face of a population that is really, in my mind, systematically de-educated. I mean, that's why Teresa mentions that it's really, people say we can't even mention words like imperialism because there's this overwhelming misconception being promoted that, for example, young, poor people joining the US Army are defending their country. It's nothing of the sort. They haven't defended their country in centuries there. Joining the army is about these operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other countries, and so on. So that level of de-education in values and the sensorial or self-sensorial approach of media channels is extremely important too. So when we talk about education, we have to talk about the failures of media and the need to create other forms of media where people can talk with their own voices to overcome that problem. I think really the level of propaganda these days is much more powerful than it's ever been. We've got more educated populations, but we face this enormous wall of disinformation about the latest wars and the social issues in our own countries.
Very good. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Tim.
And
Teresa?
I have a few thoughts. Yeah.
Yes, we're hearing you, Teresa.
Okay, this is the thing. We have the biggest economic gap between the rich and the poor in American history. It is on par with slave master and slave. And it's the same thing that Israel says. Even if they could, they would not actually finish the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians because they would keep a few as slaves. It's exactly the same mentality. I do not believe they will do to African Americans what they did to Native Americans. I don't think they actually can, partly because of the huge numbers. And also, by the way, Latinos outnumber whites in a couple of states. I'm in one of them. I'm in California. There's more Latinos in California than there are white people. There would be a heck of a fight ethnically cleansing Latinos, although they are largely in the role in California as slaves, because in agriculture they're exempt from federal guidelines which give them the minimum wage, which give them 40-hour week, which gives them holidays or sick leave or medical care. They're exempt from all labor laws. They are actually in the function of slaves. Almost every summer there's Latinos who are actually killed in the fields, and there's no repercussions, there's no penalties, nobody goes to jail. It is already in the function of slave master and slave. That's why I think that there will never be true ethnic cleansing like they did with Native Americans, because they slaughtered the indigenous people down to the last baby, where there was none left in countless tribes. What the issue is that you said, Ali, about the misbehaviors of, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And in this case with African Americans, they have pushed drugs. They have pushed alcohol. They have actually participated in encouraging gang warfare. They have actually participated in protecting whorehouses and pimps, because there's a way to destroy humanity. Somebody said it is not just, one of you guys said it, and it was actually a brilliant point. It is not just the lack of education, it's a complete moral collapse. Because if you have a complete moral collapse, if you are absolutely drugged out of your mind, which is how it is in many parts of the urban centers, if you are absolutely addicted to alcohol, if your family is engaged in incest and rapes and pimping and complete moral decay, then I will guarantee you nobody's going to be fighting the imperialists, because they're going to be fighting each other and killing each other, which is one of the reasons why the prisons, we have the highest prison population in the world, because in fact we turn on our own. We have such a desperate population. We have such a degenerated population. You know, if you want to use Marxist term, you could call it the lumpen proletariat, because in fact many scores of people are unemployed, and it's not reflected in the unemployment lines, because to be on the unemployment record you actually have to get unemployment benefits. If you've never worked, you can't get any benefits. Those people aren't even counted. You now have record numbers of people who are homeless. You know, I believe in God. I believe if there's a will, there's a way. I believe that we can find our way out of anything, even close to the political consciousness of even Martin Luther King or Malcolm X or any of the leaders of the 60s and the 70s. And having a moral decay is a part of the agenda, because they don't have to kill you if you're killing yourself through the drugs, through the alcohol, and if you're killing each other. You make their job so much easier, and you make the enslavement so much greater. This is a fascist country in many ways. It's greater than imperialist. It is already fascist for how absolutely desperate people are.
Exactly. Okay, thank you so very much for explaining
Michael,
that.
do you have anything to add?
Basically, I would like to agree, but I would like to add 1, 2, 3, 4 aspects. Number one, the completely moral situation in most of the Western society, not just in the United States. It's a part and parcel of the system. It just doesn't come from the air. Number two is the system learns and develops. How does it come? Because of the resistance the system was facing for decades from different sides. And each victory they had over the people, they were learning for the next uprising to be suppressed. I give you one example. In the 20s in Europe, they tried to implement fascism all over in Europe in order to suppress the people and from all strata of society. But during the Second World War, fascism was smashed. At the very beginning, after 1945, the people started to reorganize and start to really change societies towards more equality, etc., and free of racism, free of war propaganda, etc., etc. They tried, but a lot of those movements were broken because the system learned how to suppress them under the at that time the predominant conditions. And the same we have now, because we have quite a stable system in the United States, in Western Europe, in most of the countries, especially Germany, Britain, France,